Good. I know you're very busy, so I do appreciate you taking a few minutes to speak to us. Ryan Mee, of course, the CEO of Fulcrum Metals, is here. We've already spoken to you a couple of times, so I won't introduce you again. But I know you know Minister Pirie fairly well, don't you? You've crossed paths quite a few times on the project that you're doing out in Ontario, the Gold Tailings Project. So it's nice to sort of link you two together, really. Minister Pirie, if I can come to you first and just ask you about what's the mining environment like in Ontario at the moment, and where do you see it perhaps going in the years to come?
Quite frankly, well, it's only going to get better. It's marvelous right now. I mean, with the emphasis on critical minerals and also gold. Gold is just performing as you would imagine with the geopolitical problems that we got, tensions right now. And the lens that Canada looks at critical minerals through is associated with, as it weans off of fossil fuels and move into the electrification of the economy. But the U.S. has the same viewpoint, but their lens is national security. So, we have got the minerals that the world wants, but most importantly, we've got the metals that our biggest trading partner needs as well, and we keep finding more of them. Yeah. So it's tremendously exciting on a number of different fronts. It's also a very serious and tense geopolitical situation that helps gold, and we're finding the minerals that are required for both. We just found cesium just west of Lake Abitibi. There's no known deposit of being mined globally right now, and that mineral is absolutely essential for national security, and it's stockpiled in China. So it's just a real it speaks to the mining potential in Ontario and what we can do to provide the materials that are to fill the needs both from electrification of our economy and national security. So it's an exciting time.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned gold. Of course, gold's been performing extremely well. Sure. All-time highs, seems to keep hitting them over and over again. Of course, Ryan, that's what you're in, isn't it? It's all about gold with Fulcrum Metals.
Yes, it is. It's about recovering gold from tailing sites. In Timmins, Kirkland Lake, it's got an esteemed history of gold production. There's a lot of tailings, which has been sat there going back 100 years. It's been waiting for innovation to catch up and have the ability to recover gold and remediate those tailing sites. And we believe we've got the technology to do that. Yeah. We started to discuss our strategy with the mines team back in November last year. And from that, I was introduced to George, and we met at PDAC in March this year. So, we discussed what we're looking to do, and, there's a lot of tailings out there to go out there, clean up, pull some economic value out. And, ultimately, this is also going to help towards the transition to a lower carbon, industry. We're not building new mines here. It's already mined material at surface. So we're looking at reprocessing and regeneration. So it's two strong points at what we're looking to achieve. And, obviously, George knows what we're looking to achieve here. And, pleasingly, he's been very supportive of us, since that early engagement.
Good. Well, that's important, early engagement. I do want to get an idea of how supportive you are of sort of juniors, for example, like Fulcrum here. Ryan comes on Stockbox a lot. We're talking about the tailings project. We're talking about how much of a problem tailings are in Ontario. So how much of an importance is it for you to address these historical tailings dumps here, to reprocess them, make them safer, and indeed extract value from them?
Well, quite frankly, I mean, the reclamation part of our ministry, I mean, that's our responsibility. We take great pride in how we do that. So it's in good order. But what we're talking about now, it's not just tailings as well. If you take a look at what Morocco is doing in Sudbury, recovering nickel from the heap leach or the heap pads that have been there for well over 100 years in tailings. So there's all kinds of opportunities to get revenue and profits and metals out of the tailings and reprocessing and heap leach dumps as well. Okay. So that's we've got rare earths in Northern Ontario, but quite frankly, it might just be that we're the first production of rare earths will come from those recycled tailings.
Okay, excellent. And how high on the agenda is on the Ontario government to help juniors, like, for example, Fulcrum here, all the other operators in Ontario?
Really and truly, that's what we do. We don't build mines, but we set the table for them with the critical mineral strategy. We've got a junior exploration program. We've got the innovation fund. We just we as you know passed the Building More Mines Act. We've developed the regulations in April last year. We had more regulations came out this year that allow us to do things like reprocess the tailing and heap dumps in Sudbury and Timmins and other places. So yeah, we're working with all mining companies. We set the table, and that's what we're doing.
Well, there we go, setting the table, and you've got to deliver the goods, Ryan. So,
well, we're working on it. You know, we've got some exceptional recoveries of gold from our tailings, which, you know, as George points out, you know, the Ontario government are very supportive. They've got a good framework for the reprocessing of tailings. And, you know, we can reinvest these profits to scale out the operations across other sites. And ultimately, you know, it leads to reclamation of the land. So it's a winner for all stakeholders, governments, local communities, and investors. I think it's an important, you know, three corners, you know, for good business.
yeah. Well, it's good to see you engaging, as you say, at this early stage. It's very important. Also, as well, of course, First Nations are very important to consider, aren't they, in Ontario as well? Does the Ontario government get involved in sort of helping with those relations, with making sure that those guys are kept appraised and happy with everything that's going on?
I mean, it's our responsibility to, under the Constitution, to conduct the duty to consult. As I said, when we changed the Mining Act, there was two things that there wasn't a word changed in the old act, the new one, and one was changing Ontario's world-class environmental standards and the duty to consult. It's the same wording. It's simply what we do. It's
Good. Well, thank you very much for taking your time, Minister Pirie, and of course Ryan Me. It's good to talk to you all in person. Of course, we spoke separately last year. We speak separately, but good to see the start of a relationship here. And I'm sure we'll be, following the story. Well, we'll be following Fulcrum's story a lot, and hopefully chatting again in the near future. But thank you very much
thank you
for your time.
For asking me here.
No problem. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much, Ryan and George. You can carry on the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, George.
Thanks. Cheers. No problem. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Okay, well, that was great. We've got a bit of a chat there with Minister Pirie and, of course, Ryan Me. Really good to get those guys together, and it's good to hear that they're got that early relationship going there. We've now got our next guest, perfectly timed. Come on in. How are you, John?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. I'm very good. Of course,
seamless organisation.
Well, this morning was a little bit tricky, but it's working a bit better so far this afternoon. So thank you for being on time.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, no, we of course met on the pitch battles, didn't we?
That's right.
Last year at the Mines and Money or the Resulting Tomorrow show. But of course, you're based in Australia with your fund. I want to get a sense, first of all, really from the Australian point of view, how it's been generally. I think generally for the markets in Australia, but particular emphasis on the mining and exploration space.
Yeah. So look, I think it's relatively good. I don't know if that's saying a lot, but certainly versus the North American market, we certainly see that the Aussie market has been stronger. And then, just in the last 24 hours or so, we're seeing companies like Spartan, which is probably, the gold company right next to Ramelius there at Dalgaranga in Western Australia. They are raising $200 million. So that's big lick of capital in anyone's language. And so that sort of demonstrates that there is some really good interest in the sector, in the Aussie sector. And then also the thing that just happened yesterday was Northern Star making a takeover play for De Grey Mining. Okay. And that's De Grey Mining's one of the fund's former investments, which is probably one of our best ever investments. So there's quite a bit of activity. I guess those two things are very much Western Australian gold, and I think WA gold is having, while maybe it's not getting the market recognition that it could. WA gold is definitely having some time in the sun. So you're seeing that the gold oil ratio at almost all-time highs of like 38-1, where normally that ratio trades between 20 and 30 to 1. So it just means that you can mine for the same amount of or for the same amount of dollars you spend on a barrel of oil or power costs in terms of mining or processing, you can mine more gold.
Right.
And yeah, so the WA gold producers and globally, gold producers are having with gold at 2,600, 2,650 US dollars an ounce, and in Aussie dollar terms, that's over $4,000 an ounce, which is just, whenever I say that, it's sort of, you got to sort of do a double take. Is that really the price? And it is fantastic. But I guess the thing that's happened is that, equity prices are arguably not really reflecting how much money the gold miners are making.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that Australia is sort of faring quite well, because compared to North America, and certainly London, where we're mostly based, we've seen it's been quite a tough year. I think generally in the markets, but particularly with mining and exploration. I mean, the juniors I was talking to just earlier, their really valuations are almost rock bottom. And then you've got the commodities, as you say, like gold at all-time highs. Uranium, of course, that was a talk last year at this conference.
And still good.
And it's basically held, hasn't it, the whole time? And then copper's been a big theme. So I don't know why maybe London's lagging behind on some of that. What do you think's driving the Australian interest, do you think, in the sector?
I think it's because we've got nothing else to invest in.
Mining country.
Yeah, it's a mining country. I think if you like, the more risk tolerant money, or even the speculative money, hasn't been damaged, if you like, by nearly so much as things by a cannabis boom, or there's not really a big fintech sector in Australia. And so mining is one of the leading industries. So there's not. It's perhaps because there's not a lot of alternatives, particularly in the more high-risk space, that Australia's fared better. And certainly we've seen a number of companies talking about or coming to investigate, out of Canada, for example, coming to investigate a dual listing or a relisting on the ASX, just to try and catch that better valuation that the Aussie companies are getting.
Do you think that the mindset with Australian investors is slightly different to, let's say, London or North American investors? I mean, particularly more London, when you talked about sort of the crypto or the tech and that kind of, if you like, fast money, whereas mining is not fast money. Do you think because the Australian investors have more of a longer-term mindset when it comes to investing?
I think so. There's probably, in terms of mining and exploration, there's probably a high amount of risk tolerance. For example, the richest people in Australia are, mining people, like Gina Reinhardt and Andrew Forrest or whatever. They've made their money out of mining iron ore. And some of them have also, some of the other high net wealths have made, lots of money out of coal mining. Some made a lot of money out of lithium before the bottom fell out of the market. So there's an affinity. There's in some cases there's a love of mining, and I've made money in this sector before. I hope to try and do it again.
Yeah. And is it only Australia that the fund focuses in, or are you global?
No, we're global. Like, we're based in Melbourne, and over 50% of our investments are listed on the ASX. But we do have a number of unlisted investments which can be anywhere in the world, and we do have about 15%, I think, listed in either Canada or here in London.
And it's only resources, isn't it?
Completely focused on resources, and really focused on junior resources. So, yeah.
What's the sort of commodity spread, would you say?
Look, we're across the board. In fact, we even do some oil and gas, with about 10% of the fund. But the bulk of it is precious metals. So about 50% gold, and then at the moment, with the upswing in silver, we're about 7% in silver.
Okay, interesting. Do you have any interest or exposure to Greatland Gold?
Look, indirectly, but not. Okay. I don't directly. We don't directly have an investment in Greatland, but that's been great for the sector and great for that region, which is a really the Paterson province is still a really prospective area that's sort of to scratch the surface. Yeah,
it's great for London, that as well. I mean, I remember I was invested in Greatland Gold back in 2016. Yeah, when it was really low. And I sort of doubled my money. It was my first one bagger, if you like, and I was really pleased with myself. And I had to sell it because I needed the money. Yeah. And then where's it gone? Well, you can't look back and dwell on that. Yeah. But I mean, what a great win for London. And of course, they raised a lot of money recently with taking back ownership. So there is money there for good projects.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. just meeting with a company this morning, which is looking at doing an IPO spin out of a Patterson play, really trying to piggyback on the fantastic success that Greatland has had, and this company's got a project right next to the Javieron deposit. So fingers crossed. Yeah.
So how many opportunities are coming across your desk on a monthly basis, would you say?
Look, there's lots of fish in the sea, and as I say, I've got to throw most of them back, unfortunately. Yeah. But there's some cracking opportunities, and there would be well more than one a day. Yeah. So because there's 800 listed resources companies on the ASX, on the Canadian exchanges. I think I've been told there's about 1,600 resources companies, and then there's innumerable unlisted seeder opportunities as well. And we try and look at across that sector.
And how are you assessing those opportunities that come across your desk? I mean, you say you're sort of a broad spread of commodities, so I guess you're not binning stuff off if you think commodities are not worth it. You are taking a look at them. What are some of the key sort of criteria that you're looking at when you're assessing different investment opportunities?
Look, I think sort of motherhood to say it's people and project, but on top of that, you've really got to see the value. So we generally take perhaps a bit more risk than the average institutional investor, but we've got to see the potential to be compensated for that risk. The mythical 10-bagger. That's how we screen it, and obviously we have an overlay of the commodities of interest. We try and weight the portfolio towards the commodities that we prefer at any one time.
Okay. And if you were to sort of name some of those commodities, like gold, obviously, and silver is one of them. You said you've got 50% exposure to that sector.
That's right.
What other commodities do you think might be the more shining stars or the outperformers as maybe we start going into the next sort of bull market in this sector?
Yeah, look, I mean, straw hats in winter. Nickel has been very beaten up. Sulfide nickel.
Twice I've heard nickel today.
Yeah. Well, I think nickel is historically a very volatile commodity. Probably one of the most volatile commodities. Probably been outshone in volatility by lithium. But that's another one that I think has got potential to come back, because nickel and lithium both pretty small markets, and in my view, it's easier for a small market to swing from oversupply to undersupply and back again. So we've had two lithium, arguably three lithium booms, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have another one. And nickel booms, that goes back to the Poseidon boom of the early 70s. So I'm sure we'll have another nickel boom as well. So there are a couple, and then I think it's interesting commodities at the moment. Tungsten. Right. I just went and looked at an interesting tungsten project in northern Spain on this trip, and they're saying we've got more demand than we can supply, and bauxite. Bauxite is doing bauxite to alumina to the final product of aluminium. China is really undersupplied at the moment in bauxite, and there's been curtailment or restriction on Guinea, which is the biggest supplier, but also Indonesia's trying to reshore or create domestic refining. So the bauxite price has gone up 80% in the last 2 years, and that's a little bit of a niche commodity, but it could it is sort of doing what iron ore did 20 years ago. So.
Interesting. That's some commodities I didn't think of there. So that's good food for thought. Out of interest, just because you mentioned tungsten, have you heard of Guardian Metal Resources in North? Yeah.
Well, look, great to come to this conference. Guardian Metal. Just having a meeting with the major shareholder this morning. It was the first time I might have heard the name before, but the first time I'd really had any info about it. So that's the benefit of getting out of your home city and traveling across the world and finding out these new things.
Well, Oliver Friesen is regularly on Stockbox. He always says the largest underdeveloped tungsten deposit in the United States. So I'll be very keen to hear your opinion once you've done a little assessment of it and see what you think. Just finally, John, where are we in the sector? Well, actually, the first question: how long have you been doing this for?
Oh, that's a good
while.
Question. Probably resource financing. I got into it post my brief geology career 25 years ago.
Okay, so you've seen a cycle or two?
Seen it, yeah, probably, yeah.
Where do you think we are at the moment in the cycle, and what's the outlook looking like for the next few years, do you think?
Look, I think on the metals front, metals prices are pretty good. Historically, without really taking into account inflation. But in terms of equity prices, we're still sort of bouncing along a bottom. That's for sure. So when is the equity market going to recognise that the metals prices are good, and the fundamental outlook for most metals is excellent. So the future looks really strong and I think interest rates do play a pretty large factor into what money goes into, particularly the small end of the market. So interest rates will be a determining factor on that. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time, John Forwood from Lowell Resources Fund. Great to talk to you. Pleasure to see you again. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Pam, who is down at the Conroy Gold stand, and she'll be doing an interview with the Conroy Gold team. But Pam, over to you.
And now we're joined by Conroy Gold and Natural Resources, as you can see here. Now, of course, regulars on Stockbox. But let me just start off by introducing, we have Cathal Jones, we have John Sherman, the chairman. Of course, Cathal is the finance director. And we also have Marion Moroney, who is also a director as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today at Stockbox. How are you? I mean, in fact, I'd like to just start by mentioning Richard, of course, a huge loss to the industry. I personally loved interviewing Richard, and he was on Stockbox regularly. John, so you yourself, you've taken over as chairman. How does that feel? Tell us a little bit more.
Well, first of all, it's going to be very hard to replace someone like Richard, who's a visionary and basically from an old antimony mine, built up a large land package with plenty of opportunity and a very interesting project. But in that sense, he's given us a nice legacy starting point to build from. And my background is as a financial investor, over 25 years in the investment management business. So I bring that, capital allocation, capital raising skills to the table, along with governance. But I think now for the company, we need to focus on getting a mine up and running into production. So to realize the promise that's embedded in Richard's vision that he pulled together.
Yeah, and this was his vision, wasn't it, of having an operating gold mine in Ireland. So you're continuing the work.
Yeah, so that was always his vision, but as he worked, he found a bigger and bigger and bigger opportunity, which he continued to pull together. Sometimes not at the expense of maybe not starting a small mine early. He thought big, but now we have the canvas, as I said, and so we'll focus on the lead target at Clontiburett.
Well, John, you are his son-in-law as well. So you've witnessed this for many years. So just talk us through this when you say the vision got bigger and bigger. What did you witness? What did you see?
Well, I guess I witnessed it from the side. I worked in investment management business, so I had my own compliance issues, so I couldn't get too deeply involved in the company. So I became the deputy chairman at January, and that's when the immersion was already underway, but that's when it started. So I don't know the ins and outs of the history, but what I have seen is the effort, the dedication that he put into it, and as I said, pulling together the opportunity. And what you'll hear from us today is a lot of that work was underway while Richard was still with us. So it's continuing what we had started. So
you're sticking to the vision, you're sticking to the plan that he had.
Yeah, we're staying focused on the journey, and that's to bring in a mine.
Well, that's great. And Marianne, let me just bring you in as well, because of course, together you make a strong technical team, but let's just have a few words from yourself on your background. What's your experience, and when did you join the team?
My background is an exploration geologist. I've been involved in the gold industry for 30 years. I worked most of my career with a very large gold producer, global company. So I've been exposed to most mineral belts in the world and seen a lot of very large deposits, particularly in my role looking at new opportunities for the company. About 5 or 6 years ago, Maureen and Richard reached out to me when I was with the previous company and asked me to come visit them at the PDAC booth. And I did for two reasons. One is the style of mineralisation has the potential to be quite high grade. The second is I was actually born in Ennis in County Clare. My family moved to Australia when I was quite young. And I thought it'd be nice to just touch base with the Irish again.
I did wonder when I heard your last name.
Yeah. My mum's name's Hanrahan, so shout out to the Hanrahans. And so I visited the booth and kept in contact. And then I left my previous employer last year. And then earlier this year, on my way to PDAC, Maureen reached out and asked if I could swing by and have a look at the project on my way over. And so I decided to. And I was actually really pleasantly surprised with the geology and the opportunity. It was a lot more than I was expecting. And the style of mineralisation, not just the style of mineralisation, the type of rocks, the host rocks, the age of the rocks, the age of the mineralising event, and the style of mineralisation is very, very similar to the deposits we have in southeastern Australia where I grew up and studied. So think of, Fosterville, which has been in the news over the last 5 or 6 years, very large, high grade. And then even Mandalay Resources, Costerfield, Mandalay here this week also. Those style of gold and antimony mines are very similar to the style of mineralisation we have here on the Discs of Gold project. And so I was invited to join the board, and it was just an opportunity I couldn't pass up. I think there's a huge potential for growth. I think the stage of the deposit would be the equivalent of some of the Victorian deposits 20 or 30 years ago. And I just find it amazing that there's been so little gold exploration in Ireland. We've all heard about the zinc story and the base metals, and we know about the leprechaun and the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But these are massive trends of gold that are just underexplored. I mean, there's 90 kilometres of geochemical anomalism at surface. There aren't many places in the planet that you get that. I mean, these are serious mineralised trends. Yeah. So I just got super excited about it and happily joined the board and been over now a few times this year working with the geologists. We have a bit of work to do on the geological model to understand the controls to mineralisation before we embark on the next phase of work.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you're excited and I can feel that excitement. But it is exciting, isn't it? And when you think about, when we think about the legends and the myths and what have you about that pot of gold, and there's stories going back where people were just finding nuggets in rivers and what have you. And when you're saying, though, that the geology is identical to Australia, and I know, Cathal, we were talking a little bit earlier, and you were also talking about the similarities between Canada and at this site as well. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it's a reasonably well known from a geological perspective fact, but not that well known outside of that is that Canada and Ireland were together many years ago. So Newfoundland, where you find a significant amount of activity from gold exploration with deposit, everything ranging from greenfield up to significant scale gold deposits are actually present in Newfoundland. That was Ireland, basically, an extension of Ireland years ago. So we're on trend with all of those, and it extends through Ireland. So that's a story that's unfolding. It's been the same across a number of different industries. Even we found the same I've experienced in oil and gas as well. All of the super majors followed in Ireland what they saw offshore Newfoundland about 10 years ago. So it's exciting to be at the stage of the story that's early, but that people are now beginning to understand and realize. I mean, from our perspective, we see ourselves as a comparator company with a company called Newfound Gold, who are at a more advanced drilling phase, in that they've maybe drilled 300,000 meters, where we have drilled 30,000 meters or 25,000 meters. But what they're finding in terms of high grades, we can see the potential for all that in what we're doing. And it's really, so as I say, it's an exciting stage to be at. My background is project finance, so I'm really looking forward to getting into ultimately the project finance bit of that, and in ensuring that we can get the capital to get a mine up and running, which again was the vision.
And how much are you looking to raise?
Well, at the moment, we're looking for a strategic partner, or be that a strategic investment partner or a joint venture partner that'll help just deploy cash in the ground to prove on things. To get all the way to a mine development depends on the size of the mine you're going to do. You could be up to 300,000, 500, 300 million, 500 million to get a mine in. But right now we don't need that. But we certainly need 5, 10, 20 million over time to move this project on in stages at the pace we want to move it on in. And we'll be looking at ways of doing that don't necessarily dilute the share price. Ideally, you'd be bringing some of those partners or strategic investors in at the asset level, so that the value that the shareholders have, like ourselves, there's many of us have been working with this company for a significant amount of time, and we want to see the value in the shares reflect the value that's in the ground.
Yeah.
And that's all of our goal.
Yeah. So, what are the different stages that you're looking at? In terms of, when you were talking about then getting investment and doing it stage by stage at the pace that is comfortable to yourselves, what would be the next few milestones there?
Well, I suppose Marion touched on the initial phase of work is building the geological model. Then they'll be drilling out that geological model. In parallel with that, you'll be doing all the baseline information gathering and things that need to be done that are time defined, in terms of being in a position to submit a planning application, so that you don't lose time, you don't understand your geological model and have to start from scratch. So all of that work, some of it's been ongoing for years, because we've always known that we want to bring in a mine.
Yes.
But then there's some of it, as we expand the footprint of what we're looking at, there's some of it that will be new. So I would think, the next stage, year and a half, we'd be looking at spending another 5 to 10 in the ground if we can get the right partner.
Yeah. And in terms of geography, in terms of the area that we are looking at, I mean, this is quite a large area, isn't it? Is it Clontibert? Clontibert, am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's all right. It took me about 3 months to be able to pronounce Clontibert. So look, the land package itself, it's an entire belt or parallel trends. The company has a land position over 1,000 square kilometres. So that's what we call the Discs of Gold project. It's 2 parallel trends. The trends are about 90 kilometres in length if you put them together. Within that trend of geochemical anomalism, there's a couple of centres of gravity that have been at the focus of work. One of them is Clontibert. It's the most advanced one. And so that's really the prospect or the potential mine to be. That's got a 520,000 ounce defined resource, but really hasn't been touched that much in the last few years. Beyond that, the next, I suppose, centre of gravity would be Clay Lake, just to the north of that. And then really between those 2 prospects, which are 8 kilometres apart, there's a 100 metre wide corridor, a shear zone, that grades 1 gram per tonne that is untouched or very rarely touched between these 2 prospects. So that's really kind of the focus of the centre of gravity in the near term, to build that geology model, to understand the controls to mineralisation. Because we've got gold only, we have some high-grade gold, we have low-grade gold. There's also gold, antimony and arsenopyrite. So we need to understand, are these spatially and temporally related? They just happen to be kind of hanging out together and they're not actually related, so 2 different mineralized types. And then what we can do from an economics point of view, because the antimony, even though it's an old antimony mine at Clontibert, antimony wasn't included in the economic studies or the geology model. So that's what we want to do, to understand the antimony, high-grade controls, and then target those controls going forward.
And how difficult or easy do you think it's going to be to open a gold mine in Ireland, to actually get it out of the ground?
Look, I think it's going to be pretty straightforward. For a few reasons. One, I've been talking with the guys on understanding both the fiscal regime in the Republic of Ireland, which is very good. There's a strong mining culture in the Republic, the zinc mines, and putting really the economy of Ireland back on the map. And then also around Clontarf area itself, in that county, there's a gypsum mine. So there's a mining culture in that area. I've been to the project a few times. I've met with, many of the team live and work in the area, and it is all positive. It's all positive support that I'm seeing. So, barring any political handballs, I think it should be pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and that's all looking good at the moment. So that's wonderful. And John, what about yourself? Are you looking, I know you're sticking to the plan, we've discussed this, but you're sticking to the vision, but are you looking to bring anything in extra? Are you looking to bring in any changes at all?
I think we have the opportunity, so it's the focus, and it's focused on a mine. I think investors have been very patient over the years, and that's the goal. And so, but as I said, that focus was beginning to emerge as with Professor Conroy, we're headed in that direction. So
that's great. And Castle, what about yourself? Do you have a lot of meetings booked in over the next 3 days? Have you got a busy couple of days ahead here at the event?
Yeah, we do indeed. It's as you can see, it's a very busy event. Certainly, our calendars are extraordinarily busy. It's nice to have the opportunity to say no, and to have to decide who you want to meet, and try to fit in everybody. Which is, there's a few of us here, so it's affording us the ability to do that. Thank God.
Well, as I mentioned, you've got a very lucrative project here, so it's nice that you do have the opportunity to say no and take your pick there. But of course, we do speak to you regularly on Stockbox, and we look forward to continuing to follow the story. And once you've got that gold mine open, we'll be coming across and having a look ourselves. Yes. But absolutely wonderful to speak to the three of you today. Thank you so much for taking the time. And now back over to Mark.
Well, we're back after a short break. We've managed to find Mark Frayman from Orion Industrial Ventures. Mark, thank you very much for your time. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's been a long morning, afternoon, but it's lots of good stuff.
Where have you come from?
Well, I'm in London today, but I'm come from Australia.
I come from Australia. Right,
Yes.
okay. And what do you want to achieve while you're here? What's the...
I mean, look, our fund is global, so we have an office in Orion in London, so spend time there. But just plugging into the ecosystem, I mean, this is a wonderful opportunity to see new startups, see new investors. Every time we come to an event like this, it's just remarkable how much mining's become critical minerals and how much new opportunities there is in the space.
Sure. So Orion then, just tell us a little bit about Orion and the fund and what you're all about.
Sure. So Orion's a very large private asset investor across the mining value chain. We're sort of a one-stop shop where we've got private equity strategies, private credit strategies. We have a hedge fund, listed equities manager, and I manage the venture capital business focused on mining technologies as a part of that.
That's it, mining technologies, yeah. So what sort of things are you looking at?
We'll invest across the value chain, so everything ranging from new ways to help discovery, so new sensors for exploration, new ways to analyse that data. We'll look for new ways to plan a mine, new ways to operate, whether that's automation of a fleet or industrial efficiencies at a site. We'll look at, in the processing space, the big area for us, so new ways to process clean, green, domestic supply of lithium, nickel, copper, often from low-grade resource, and then right down to recycling and end-of-life scrap and waste management.
And what's the sort of volume of opportunities or innovations that you're sort of seeing regularly and assessing? Because I think that could be quite a good sort of indicator, perhaps, where the sector is.
And it's growing. I mean, prior to this, I was at BHP Ventures, and I thought we saw a lot there. Now what we see at Orion and in the current market is incredible. I mean, I think in our CRM, we've seen over 900 companies so far focused on this space.
Okay. Do you think that sort of suggests that the sector generally is perhaps got a bright future?
I think it does.
Yeah?
I think it does. I think we're starting to see, obviously, the big mining companies invest in technologies. We're starting to see financial investors that are generalist climate tech investors come to critical minerals. We're starting to see private equity play at the later end of the spectrum. I mean, I think we're one of the few funds that are really experts in this space. So in that seed to Series A space, I still think there's a lot of opportunity for experts, but I think as the sector matures, I think we're seeing a lot of capital come to the space, recognising this as, it's a huge lever of decarbonisation, of urbanisation, militarisation, some of AI, those big trends in the economy. Critical minerals is a lever to all of those, and technologies is a way to unlock low-grade supply in friendly jurisdictions. So I think now's a great time to be in this space.
AI is interesting, isn't it? I mean, I spoke to a company the other day, Botswana Diamonds actually, who come on Stockbox a lot, and they're using AI to go through all the historical sort of workings and data room to just really help them to process it effectively and perhaps identify little areas that might have been missed otherwise. Are you seeing AI coming into this sector? Do you think it's going to be quite a big part of the mining sector?
You might have heard the panel I spoke about before. I think AI is an enabler to the sector. I think you'll start to see old practices be automated as a first thing, but I think you'll see AI, whether that's vision AI, predictive AI, I think you'll start to see that across the space. I think AI is also a hugely energy consumption area, and it's therefore a demand driver for the space because the energy support that will need critical minerals to deliver into that. So it's sort of multifaceted as to how AI will impact the sector.
Okay, good. And on venture capital then, in terms of perhaps the interest that you're seeing or getting a sense for, let's say. I mean, today I was told that everything's up 20%. So they've got 20% more companies, 20% more investors here.
At the conference. It doesn't
yeah.
surprise me. It's big.
Yeah, well, it's a big conference, yeah. But I mean, I think certainly from London's point of view, this last year, 2024, has been quite tough, particularly for junior miners. What are you seeing on the venture capital side of things?
In terms of
interest in the mining sector?
Oh, as I said before, I think it's growing. I think people that are mining investors start to now think, well, to get out some of these deposits to economically, or even discover more, to process more, and to do so, you need new technologies. And I think people that are generalist investors in mining are starting to shift to venture as a way to get broad-based exposure. You know, if you look at, say, our portfolio, we've got copper processing companies that target low-grade chalcopyrite. Rather than invest in just one mine site, investing in technology that does that gives you exposure across that sector. And I think we're starting to see people understand.
Okay, good. And final question: how was your panel? What sort of things were discussed?
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah?
It was fun. It was all about AI,
Okay, yeah.
and it was a really good sort of multidisciplinary panel. People spoke about, from deep technology side, what are the latest models being built, through to the supporting infrastructure, the satellites you need, through to me, who obviously applied a very realistic, cold hard investment lens to how some of these companies are going to make money.
Okay.
I enjoyed being part of it.
Good, good. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's good to grab you for a few minutes. Are you here for the whole rest
I'm here for today, flying out tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning. Okay, good. Well, I wish you a very good rest of your day here. Safe journey back. Mark Frayman, that's the from Orion Industrial Ventures. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the conference. And I'll now hand over to Pam, who's at the Cornish Pavilion for the special Cornish Pavilion round 2. So Pam, over to you.
Hello, we're back on the floor right now, and we are joined by Dr. Ola Zawalna-Gier from Camborne School of Mines. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Have you experienced this event before, or is it your first time?
No, this is the first time I'm here.
And what are your thoughts? What are your observations?
It's big, that's for sure. I just walked around, so there are few stands which really are of interest. Obviously, we're here showcasing our 6 exploration companies from Cornwall. We have quite good interest. There are lots of people coming here and just talking to us that just want to know where the Cornwall is. So yeah, the experience is so far so good.
So you've had people actually asking you where Cornwall is?
And yeah, obviously not the British people, but yes, there are some people who are coming and asking where Cornwall is, so we have to explain the southwest part of.
Well, this is one thing that really surprised me coming to this event today as well, is we have got global, people from globally all over here. So yeah, I can understand why they might not know the part of the British Isles that is Cornwall, but you do have mining happening there in Cornwall, and you also have the Cornwall Mining Alliance. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so Cornwall Mining Alliance has been established in 2016, and it was to provide a platform for the different businesses in Cornwall to get together, to have a website where they could be listed with the services and products. It has 130 members currently, and they are all closely related to mining or geothermal energy, because this is what we have as well. Obviously, Cornwall is this brilliant place because of its location, the geology, but also resources too. The Cornwall is located on the granite batholite, which is above batholith, which has a potential.
Sorry, it's located where?
On granite batholith, with the potential not only for critical minerals like tin, tungsten, and lithium, but also geothermal energy. And also, just to add to it, that we have the Camborne School of Mines. Now it's part of University of Exeter, but it generated the graduates you can find in every single environment around the world. And there are all of the skills we already require. So when I'm saying resources, we have all of the skills generated here in Cornwall, but also we have loads of businesses with very specialized skills too.
Yeah. So what work are you actually doing at the CMA to attract more mining companies, an inward investment into Cornish mining?
The Cornwall Mining Alliance has been established to support the georesources sector growth, and it is by providing a platform to grow and market all of the businesses in Cornwall related to mining and geothermal energy. Also to create the very strong network for all of the companies, and provide a link for government and other organizations to come with opportunities. So the Cornwall Mine Alliance is generally like a platform or point of reference. We can signpost to members, but also we can influence what's happening in government, and we're working with the governmental strategy. As for bringing up investors or mining companies, Cornwall is a great place to be. I already mentioned that we have a Camborne School of Mines, but generally in the whole region we have 3 universities with different specializations. Many specializations, but generally we have people already here. We are working very closely with the businesses as well to identify the gaps in skills and develop it towards it. Obviously geology speaks for themselves because we have all of the resources. The recent UK criticality assessment listed 3 minerals which we have in Cornwall already in the assessment. So it's a tin, tungsten and lithium. We have the high-grade deposits of all of them. There are many synergies as well you can create. So for example, the lithium in brine is extracted from the water which is pumped in the geothermal energy process. So there are already synergies. There is a workforce as well already existing here. There is a lot of workspace as well. So there are lots of units when the investors can come and start the new companies possibly, or the different mining companies. There is also, it's all about the lifestyle as well. Cornwall has an amazing lifestyle, and the operational costs are much lower. So we are all trying to promote it.
And why is that? Why are the operational costs lower there in Cornwall?
There are not big cities. We are all very, very local. So obviously everything is much cheaper.
Yeah. And, at the Camborne School of Mines, what kind of interest are you seeing in terms of the admission onto courses? Are you finding that a lot of young people are, applying for these courses? What kind of interest do you get?
We have a huge interest actually in all of the courses, especially that recently we opened the mining engineering undergraduate courses again. We have people applying already for it. But also, how I said, the Camborne School of Mine is for over, I think, 200 years or something like that. So it's well world renowned, and even if you want to work somewhere else, not here in Cornwall, it's a good school with good reputation to go to and graduate from.
Yeah, absolutely. But how important would you say it is for, of course, that's talking about the students, about people coming onto the courses, but what about educating the public in terms of mining? Because the industry can be quite misunderstood in terms of the negative effect on the environment. What would you say to that?
Well, first of all, with the mining heritage in Cornwall, there is a much better understanding and acceptance for mining, I believe, because, it is in Cornish people blood already. So there is not much problems influencing the mining further, especially right now that we're trying to do it in a far more sustainable way, but also explaining to people that mining, especially of those critical minerals, is absolutely essential for the clean energy transition. It's really, really important, and I think the acceptance grows with that.
Yeah. So in terms of an important point that you made there in terms of mining the critical minerals being essential, can you just expand on that a little bit for people that might not know, for people that might be watching this, that might be of the mindset of, it's not good for the environment? What would you say? Why do we need it?
First of all, yes, mining is still thought of being a dirty business. However, people have a wrong impression about mining because nowadays mining has to be done in a way when it is self-sustainable and it's greener. So we are doing everything by incorporating ESG, very aspects towards it. Like within the CMA at the moment, we have the Georesources Cluster Project, which is delivered by University of Exeter, and we commissioned 3 feasibility studies. So one big one is the strategic environmental assessment. So we are pretty much looking at whole Cornwall and what the georesources activities can cause and how to improve it. So, we do improve it. It's not as dirty as people thought. And I think it's really important to shout out about it.
This is why these conversations are so valuable, really, in terms of discussing it. Does it affect the local people negatively at all?
I don't think it does. It creates jobs, and I think this is something. This is the selling point. Also, mention why the critical minerals are so important. So this is the second part of the question. It is important because tin, tungsten, and lithium are used in all of the products, which helps clean energy transition. So lithium for EV cars, but also the tin and tungsten are essential for wind turbines, for all of the accessories we are using on a daily basis, like phones, laptops, etc.
Yes. Yeah. So we need these. We need this for our modern lifestyle, really. Well, I was talking to somebody once and they just said to me, they said, look around the room. They said, everything you can see has been mined.
Absolutely. And, even when you think about what we are wearing right now, our clothes, they have to be done in the factories using the equipment which needs those minerals and metals here. Yeah.
So with all that we've spoken about, what would you say to investors and young people on Cornwall as a mining destination or a hub in the UK?
I can honestly say that the Cornwall will lead another industrial revolution. That Cornwall will lead in the role of the changing from the fossil fuels to critical minerals, industrial revolution. So yeah, for young people, if you're interested in mining and learning more in innovations and technologies which come with it, if you're interested in geothermal energy, get involved.
Yeah. And how would they get in? How would they get in touch? So, say if somebody was looking to, get involved in a mining course, for example, how would they go about that? What would you say to them?
Oh, so Cornwall Mine Alliance is probably the best platform to get that in touch with. We have the LinkedIn account and we have our CMA website with all of the contact details. So I think we can easily signpost the relevant parties.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, Dr. Ola Zawalna-Gier. It's been a pleasure. And I know that I myself have been educated on what is happening in terms of mining in Cornwall. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
But now I'm going to hand over to my colleagues for the roundtable discussion. We have over here, I'll just walk you over. So I have my colleagues with me here. I've got Alan and Dan, and I'll leave you to do the introductions and have your roundtable discussion.
Thank you very much, Pam. Yes, Dan and myself are here with Hanno Buys, who's head of mining at British Lithium, based near to St Austell in Cornwall. Hanno, good to have you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
So, Hanno, you're based at St Austell, of course. You've developed a sustainable technology to extract lithium from Cornish granite, and you've established an inferred mineral resource estimate of 160.8 million tonnes at 0.56% lithium oxide. Can you tell us how you went about that?
Yeah. So through various techniques of quite a lot of, basically a lot of drilling, drilling for lithium. We've developed a model that shows you an inferred resource. So we call it a blob, which is it's based off of 67 holes, which is both reverse circulation and diamond drilling holes. So through that, we've gotten a lot of data of a lot of minerals that is within the rock, and we were able to get to 160 million tons of inferred resource. Beyond that, we've advanced onto a phase 4 drilling, which we have gathered a lot more information, and during the course of next year, we're confident that we should be able to declare an indicated resource, which is the next level in terms of the confidence levels of the lithium.
And of course, British Lithium has been established there for quite a few years. Can you tell us a bit about the company in the area?
Sure. So yeah, it started off as a joint venture between British Lithium and Imerys. Imerys being the major stakeholder, and currently we're fully Imerys. So the joint venture partner has been bought out. So we're fully Imerys now. And I think the exciting part about that is just with Imerys comes a lot of experience. Imerys has been operating in Cornwall for 25 years, and it's an established company with a lot of experience. So as you know, in terms of a junior mentality of entrepreneurial. Combined with an established operator, I think that's a good recipe for success in terms of getting this project off the ground. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time, and I can tell from having joined the company a year ago, there's a lot that we need to implement, which Imerys has been doing for 25 years. So it's a good place to be in terms of developing a mine.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the geology of the region and the deposit area in particular.
Sure, I'll talk a little bit about the specific geology around our area. Originally we thought of the geology as quite homogeneous. We've seen through our 67-hole drill campaign that it's not quite that homogeneous. There's quite a lot of alteration in the ore body, so we've had to adapt the way in which we're going to have to mine it going forward. Relative to other lithium deposits, it's a fairly low-grade lithium, which, if you think about a low-grade deposit, small variations in the grade might seem quite small in the bigger scheme of things, but it is quite big for us. So in terms of how we're going to mine it, so I'm a mining engineer by background, we're going to have to do some input blending because we're quite constrained for space. But yeah, the geology is quite interesting from a non-homogeneous point of view. But it's a granite, it's hard rock, so hard rock principles for mining applies. It's a hard rock granite, and we're after the mica. So with the mica, comes iron and the lithium, and through a very simple process of magnetic separation, you can beneficiate a lot of the mica from the hard rock.
Excellent. Sounds really interesting. And is there a lot of upside potential in the resource area that you can explore through further drilling and work?
For sure. I mean, we're targeting a life of mine for 30 years. So we need, currently with our throughput estimate, we need about 60 million tons we want to get it to indicated. But beyond that, there is a big resource. Our initial inferred resource is 160 million. So, that we can pretty much double the life of the mine from that. So we will most likely continue to get more definition first, so to get from indicated to measured, increase the definition of the drilling. But there is resources in the area for the next 100 years, I would say.
Excellent, that's very exciting. Can we talk a little bit about Cornwall as an operating jurisdiction? You seeing a lot of support there? Is it quite pro mining?
Definitely. I've in my career, I've worked through various projects all across Europe, and I think one of the big barriers to entry is permitting. and a lot of the sort of from the ESG side of things like heritage often, prevents mining from happening. You can't get a permit because you need to mine in an area which has got cultural heritage. I think the great thing about Cornwall is mining is the heritage. So we found that the community is very much pro mining, and I think it's an exciting. There's a lot of excitement because of the jobs that mining brings as well, well-paying jobs, which Cornwall is Cornwall welcomes. And I think in terms of like the local government, the local council, local government support with Noah Law coming to visit us, MP for the area, St. area. I think there's a lot of support from the local community, but from government as a whole. So it's exciting.
Perfect. Well, that's the sort of backdrop you want when you're developing such a large and important project.
So Hannah, we've established the mineral resource estimate. What's the roadmap looking like in the near future? So as we go forward into 2025, if I were a shareholder or an investor into British Lithium, what should I be looking for in the coming months?
Yeah, so I think, of course, with any mine development, the focus is on understanding the risks. Mining as a whole, as a business, mining is generally quite a risky business. So for us, for investors, the key outcomes for 2025 through developing our pre-feasibility study is understanding all of the risks, the technical risks, the license to operate risks, which we're fortunate there is not that many yet, but we need to crack on and get through a better understanding of all of our risks, including the ESG related risks. So focusing on understanding the geology in greater level of detail and definition, getting to 60 million tons of indicated resources, so higher confidence levels associated. And from that also work on our mine plan. I think the key thing also from a risk point of view is the deposition of tailings, which is always controversial around the world. So our tailings deposition strategy needs a lot more refinement. We need to look at best available technologies. We need to understand IRMA readiness. So IRMA, International Responsible Mining Association, and we need to see from an IRMA point of view, what are the key elements that we need to focus on. I think for a new mine, as you go from scoping level to sort of PFS, you first need to make the business case work. I think we're getting close to that point. So the next focus is making sure we understand all of the risks and making sure that what we put forward as a solution or as a mine design is sustainable and uses the best available technology to make sure the impact on the environment is minimal, or as minimal as possible.
Of course, and we very much covered the sustainability aspect at the outset, and you were talking about replacing some of the mined material with inert material. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so I mean, Imerys has been working in the area for 25 years, and it's an area that's been mined for kaolin for over almost 200 years. So, there's a lot of voids. There's a lot of old quarries, including the Eden project used to be an old kaolin quarry. So there's a lot of those going around in the area. So one of the residues or one of the products from our beneficiation process is a non-hazardous, inert, very fine sand, and there is quite a few million tons of this that we will produce from our process. we will be filling a lot of these voids in the area with that material. So in terms of putting it back to how it was originally, we'll be filling it up closer to its original sort of surface level. And through rehabilitation, geomorphology, you should be able to get the landscape, put it back to how it was before, closely enough. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Hanno, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed on the latest developments with British Lithium. Dan, there was something else I think you wanted to ask Hanno?
Yeah, definitely. I just thought maybe zooming out a little bit, can we chat a little bit about the lithium market at large? What are things looking like at the moment? How's demand? How's supply?
I think I think a lot of the market analysts will agree on one thing, is that probably we've hopefully hit the bottom of the curve in the lithium price. But yeah, I think it's reflected in the sort of the market outlook, the long-term forecast for, in our case, lithium carbonate. So it does look like things will be picking up, and I think from our point of view, the focus is all in cost to get it below the current sort of spot prices for lithium. That would mean that we have a sustainable business, or a business that can see through the dips in the market. So, and I think in our case it is possible, and that is what we're working towards.
Definitely. And do you see demand a lot stronger demand for projects and lithium produced in jurisdictions like Cornwall as opposed to other areas of the world? Does that strength of jurisdiction benefit you, do you think?
I think so. I think there's been a lot of talk around the premiums for sustainable environments, area where the rule of law applies, compared to other jurisdictions. And I think responsible operators. I think there's a lot of emphasis within Europe on ESG principles and IRMA and sustainable mining. And I think there's also a lot of incentives from government. There's a lot of involvement. I think it's an environment where critical minerals is the focus, and rightly so. I think there is a lot of energy towards getting these solutions in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you seeing the support on a national level from the government for securing domestic supply for these sorts of strategic minerals increase?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think we've had a lot of visits from senior government officials down in Cornwall in a pilot plant, and also our future quarry. And I think that the message is clear that however we can support, we're open, consider it an open door. And I think we've had very little pushback on any of the topics raised. I think the sort of push towards energy supply, especially green energy, is also moving in the right direction. We, from a mining point of view, our push is also to look at the best available technology, try and electrify our mine, our future quarry, as much as possible. We would love to be in the position of some of the major companies like Albemarle to say that, do a deal with Caterpillar and say, oh well, we're mining. We can produce some lithium. We can give you lithium, and you give us a battery-operated truck. Yeah. That would be ideal. I think we would also love to just have that with sort of, we give you lithium, and you supply us with electric company cars or something like that.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, that all sounds great, and thanks for your time there, Hanno.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yep, thank you, Hanno. Mark, it's back to you.
thank you for joining us again. A little short break there, but now I'm joined by Tom Attenborough from the London Stock Exchange. Great to be speaking to you in person. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Good. Of course, we met at a IPO a year ago, Neo Energy Metals, where we met on the balcony. My first IPO on the London Stock Exchange with the countdown there. It was really nice to be stood on the balcony and applauding with all the team there. But how have you found the event so far? I know you've had a panel, which we'll talk about in a minute, but you've been walking around. What vibe are you getting?
It's nice to see you on a different balcony here, and a very, very busy event we've got here. It's always a good event. One of the flagship events that we see here in the mining sector in London.
Yeah, indeed.
It's great to be here. From my perspective, good to see a few of our listed clients, wandering around and meet a few prospective new ones as well. So I've enjoyed it. I think it feels this year as it's sort of bigger and bolder and better than ever. I've noticed it very full. We had an event actually at the London Stock Exchange, a sort of selective event yesterday for some of the government ministers that were in town for the event. So we had 45 different government ministers in the building yesterday at a roundtable with industry. And very, very constructive event. Lots of people with lots of opinions, some great debate. But I just sense that there's a very positive vibe around today.
Good. Well, I was talking to the organisers. I've been saying this to everyone, that they told me there's about 20% more companies in, 20% more investors here this year, which is obviously really good to see, isn't it? From your point of view, looking back over 2024, and of course we interview a lot of people listed on London, particularly junior miners, get the feeling it's been quite a tough year, I think, generally for equity markets, but also particularly, I think, for junior miners. But from your point of view, you're sat at the heart of the exchange here. You're seeing things every day. What's your opinion on this year gone by?
Well, look, it's not been a bad year, actually. And I think we all need to sometimes look at things, have a little bit of context as to what else has gone on, around the world. I mean, yes, we continue to have some quite challenging macroeconomic headwinds to deal with, and some quite complicated geopolitical situations around the world to deal with, and that affects inevitably investors' risk appetite. We've seen that on exchanges, all around the world. Activity has remained, well below the activity, for example, that we saw in 2021 when things were all sort of booming ahead of the disruption we saw really at the start of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But it's not been bad. It really hasn't. And I think you look at where London stands today. We've had well over $30 billion raised on the London market year to date of equity.
Okay.
That puts London fifth globally. It puts us the number one in Europe with about 3 times the issuance to the next nearest European market. So that gives you some sort of context as to the fact that London, on a relative basis, has held its own really well. In the first half of this year, 2 of the largest 5 equity transactions globally, were listed on the London market and raised capital there. So we've seen, particularly with further issuance, that drumbeat of continued capital raising happen, very, very well. It's been a relatively slow year for IPOs. We've seen 17 so far this year. Collectively, have raised around about $1 billion. That's been a mix of companies that have gone to our main market and AIM. But again, in terms of number of IPOs, we're well ahead any of the other sort of European venues. And we're starting to see that tick back up. I think for a couple of reasons. One, I think sentiment is feeling a little bit better. Investors' risk appetite is certainly coming back a bit. We're seeing that in as market volatility declines.
Did you see that start at a certain point in the year, or?
No, I think I think it's been gradual. Getting the election behind us has been helpful.
Yeah.
Because it gives people a sort of a solid foundation and certainty, exactly, which we hadn't had for a little bit. So that was out of the way. The other thing, of course, from our perspective, that was important is that there was a long-awaited new rule book that the FCA was going to publish for the main market, which was long anticipated. It came out at the end of July and was really positive, very well received by the market. And essentially it is a simplification of the eligibility requirements to get onto the main market in the first place, in a number of areas, which I won't bore you with now, but also really making it easier for companies once on market to execute significant transactions, whether it's raising further capital or doing significant M&A. So that's again been a really big shot in the arm for the market, and we've seen again pick up in confidence, and the pipeline, of course, accordingly, sort of building quite well. The metals and mining sector, I'd say, continues to be. It's been tough going. As you say, it's been some hard yards this year, but I think we've seen some bright spots. Even given that, we've seen ACG Metals list in the sort of middle of the year, having executed its acquisition of a copper mine in Turkey. We've seen Greatland Gold execute one of the largest further issues, actually on AIM, raising $325 million to fund the acquisition. We saw Kefi, Copper and Gold in the market just yesterday, raising a much smaller amount. So things are starting to sort of tick back. It's not, it's not booming. It feels like investors are being somewhat selective, but we are seeing transactions get done. I think particularly where the use of proceeds is something that's applauded and being seen as very positive by investors. And we are starting to see, I think, in the pipeline, some announcements of some larger things coming to London as well, which is good news. By the way, that's outside of the mining sector as well. Canal Plus, when that gets demerged out of Vivendi, will be coming to the London market rather than being demerged into Paris. So that feels like a good win, for the London market. But also the couple of things in the metals and mining sector themselves. We've seen Anglo American announce its plans to unbundle various assets as part of its strategic review, and Anglo Platinum, Amplats, is going to complete a London listing in the middle of next year as part of its demerger from Anglo American. Metlen, which is a big energy and metallurgy business listed on the Athens Exchange, has announced its plans to re-domicile the business, come into London, main market listed, with the expectation of being a very significant FTSE 250 or possibly FTSE 100 on the cusp at the moment at their current market cap, which will be second quarter next year. So some of those things I think just go to continue to build confidence and start to change the narrative a little bit, which I think has been slightly doom and gloom this year. I think unnecessarily so, actually, given some things we're seeing below the waterline, if you like.
Okay. Oh, that's good to hear your opinion on that. Now, you did a panel recently, just a few minutes ago, I think, or earlier in the day, which was all about what London needs to focus on to reinvigorate itself as a mining hub. So I wonder if we can just sort of talk about some of the key takeaways from that. I mean, from your point of view, what stood out to you from that panel discussion?
Well, it's interesting because it was people were coming at it from slightly different angles. We had the panel was chaired by an investment banker who focuses on the mining sector, who clearly had some strong views, himself, as to some of the things that London does well, and some things that could be done better. We had a company on AIM, and we had a subsidiary of a company, on AIM, also who just brought different views to the table. But I think from my perspective, really interesting discussion. I think people do applaud some of the supply side changes that have gone on around the rules in particular. So people can see that the kind of reform agenda, that there's huge alignment between the London Stock Exchange, the FCA as the regulator, Treasury, the rest of government. This capital markets reform that's really been ongoing for a little while now, it is important both to UK PLC coming through, but also to international businesses who want to have London as a global financing centre and to use that as their home. So that reform agenda to the rules has gone down very well. People see that as an enormously positive step forward. What I think now people want to see is, the supply side bit's done, you've changed the rules, you've made it easier for companies to get there. Who's buying? And what can we do to reinvigorate the demand side? And there I think it's a multifaceted approach. From our perspective as an exchange, we try and make sure that we give companies the right tools to get their investor relations story out to the broadest possible audience. Events like this clearly help the profile of those companies as well. We try and make sure we're doing everything we can to engage retail investors directly. They've been an important part of particularly financing juniors, in the past on AIM. They've perhaps gone a little bit quiet, and so trying to get a little bit dynamism with retail investors, I think, is important.
It's very important, the retail investor. Do you think that the retail investor, aside from any cost of living crisis, get capital squeeze, etc., do you think the retail investor is more interested now in the tech side of things or the crypto, if you like, fast money, a bit more volatile, rather than boring old mining?
Well, we have seen a little bit of that, I think, yes, and partly, of course, it's because it's been quite difficult to participate often as a retail investor. So, in the past, IPOs, have been in the London market predominantly institutionally distributed. So, a retail investor will only have the opportunity to participate once it's actually already listed. So we're pushing quite hard to make sure that the companies have really thought about, particularly where there's a story that we think would appeal to retail investors, to make sure they use a number of retail focused platforms now that exist, provide a technology solution to access those investors directly, and try and get more of those people engaged at the point of IPO. So that's a one audience, definitely. The other point, of course, is what's happening to pension funds. And you saw the government lay out a bit of a straw man at the Mansion House speech not so long ago around the combination of certain very small government pension schemes into larger schemes. The hope and theory is that once you agglomerate some of those into bigger entities, they can afford to take diversify in a much more sensible way, not be quite so risk averse as perhaps some of the small pots have been, and just stick everything in government gilts. So I think if some of that comes to pass, as we hope it will, I think that will clearly give a good sort of tailwind to the market, rather than some of the headwinds we've seen in the last couple of years, where you've seen the challenge for a lot of companies, which is actually that some of the small mid-cap funds in particular have had net outflows to deal with as well. So that piece of it, I think, is really important as well. There were some interesting observations about if you want to raise capital, if you want to, then it's not impossible, but you've got to get your story right, and hopefully avoid some of the banana skins. I mean, clearly, in the listed community this year, you've had a bunch of challenges. Some of the commodity price, movements have been tough, particularly in areas like lithium, for example. You've had some corporate governance issues. You've had some geopolitical issues in certain parts of Africa. Some of these things have been sort of difficult to navigate. But I think more broadly, if you've got the right management team, the right focus, the right project, ultimately, there's still demand there. And hopefully with some of those, some of the demand side, reinvigorated, we'll see it a little bit easier, going forward to tap into that capital.
Okay, good.
And we're still seeing a good flow of businesses, even if some of the thinking is that it's tough. What's interesting is I think it's tough everywhere, because we've noticed this year that there's been a continued stream of companies from other jurisdictions, as well, adding a London listing in order to broaden that net.
You are seeing a lot more dual listings, I think, these days.
We are, yeah. We had a couple of Canadian companies dual list on AIM in the helium space, for example, earlier in the year. They've actually traded very well. I think that's been an interesting sort of phenomenon during my sort of career. It's because it feels like it's gone through a real life cycle. When I first started many years ago, if you wanted to attract an investor in the US, you had to have a listing there. And so there were multiple listings all around the world. And then I think as the investor base globalized, a lot of companies decided to get rid of those dual listings and focus in on one area, because their theory was, well, if investors like us, they can buy globally, they'll invest in wherever we are. I think that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years a bit of a reversion of that. I think, as a lot of companies have said, well, actually, just because an investor theoretically can invest in you and something's part of their mandate, unless it's right in front of them, they've got a piece of research. Brokers are talking to them in their time zone. They don't always, and so I think we've started to see, quite a number of TSX, ASX listed businesses in particular say, well, these things can be quite complementary. And having those sort of access to those different investor pools in what's a tough market has actually been quite a good strategy for many companies.
You've really got to lower that barrier to entry, like you say, for investors. The story, it's all about the story, but the access to just almost tapping on your phone to basically buy shares, etc. Just as easy as it possibly can be for investors to take a share in a company and follow that journey of investment.
And make it easier for the companies too.
Of course, yeah.
So whether it's the main market, we've just, as part of the listing reforms, they put in place a international secondary listing segment. So a very specific segment just for companies for whom London is going to be a second home rather than a primary home. So that's, I think, very constructive. On AIM, so watch this space. It's going to be 30 years next year that AIM's been in existence. It's got a long history of helping support the financing of juniors. I think we'll see that sort of continue. I think there are probably certain sort of tweaks around the edges that you can make with AIM, particularly now with the reforms to the main market having gone as far as they have. But it remains an absolutely core part of the London Stock Exchange Group's strategy to really fund companies right across the life cycle.
Mhm.
We're doing some interesting things in the private space. We're launching a new crossover market next year, in the middle as well.
Okay.
And then you've got AIM and the main market. So you can
Yeah.
genuinely have a funding continuum you can talk about with companies to say, hopefully we can continue to support companies of all sort of shapes, sizes, stages.
Good. And the other one I wanted to talk to you about was a point on your panel, I think it was about the Centre for African Mining Finance, making London perhaps a centre for that. And when it comes to Africa, I talk to a lot of companies who operate in Africa, and I really get a sense that Africa has got a great future in this mining exploration space. Of course, they have their own stock exchanges as well, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Which you'll probably be sort of competing with to sort of get listings on there. But how do you think London can fit in as, like, as you say, a centre for mining finance for African companies?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that London's got about 120 African companies on our market. So actually, by market cap, London's the second biggest African exchange after the JSE.
Right.
Given the value of those companies, about $100 billion of market cap just in Africa alone. So I think it's a part of the world that London investors know well, and will continue to support. I think certain other parts of the world, I think it's tougher when there's less familiarity with Africa. I had on an exchange that remained nameless, there was one company operating in Nigeria whose share price fell 10% when there's a coup in Niger.
Right.
Unrelated, but perhaps there wasn't that sophistication of understanding that Niger and Nigeria are different places.
Yeah.
So I think in London you do have that deeper understanding of the fact that Africa's a continent with 52 separate countries that all have their own sort of different pieces. So good understanding. We will see more coming. But actually, again, part of what we like to see at the London Stock Exchange is actually seeing growth of domestic markets and partnerships evolving in some of these markets as they grow and scale. Because I think that's good for everyone.
Indeed.
And we've now got a number of companies dual listed between Nigeria and London. We've got a number of we've got people looking at it from in Kenya. We've got a lot from the JSE dual listed in London.
Yeah.
I think as other markets grow and mature, we'll see again some dual listings come from those markets. So again, we don't see that so much as a competitive threat. We see that as almost an opportunity to, how can we help you maybe act as a bigger shop window to get the capital to come into what you're trying to do in your country. Yeah. So that's really the sort of philosophy we have, and hopefully we'll see that continue.
Good. We've got about 30 seconds or so left. I just want to finish off, and I was just going to say it's really nice to see the Cornish here, the Cornish Pavilion.
Yes.
Of course, real homegrown. We don't get a lot of mining in this country. It's more in Australia and North America, but it's great to see the Cornish here down, banging that mining drum for London. Can you talk about what's to come in 2025? You probably can't name any names, but give us a sense perhaps of the pipeline, or perhaps what 2025 and beyond is looking like, do you think, for interest, IPOs in the space, and how London might, the markets might fare?
I think, look, always difficult to get your crystal ball out, but, I think, now the sort of new rules are in place. I think you come into a new year. The US election obviously is now behind us, so some of the things that maybe caused investors to want to hold back a little bit will be, out of the way. I think, we've started to see a lot of activity sort of build up in some of the areas which you would expect it to ahead of something going, being announced to the public markets. So some of the pre-IPO readiness work being done by the auditors, some of the early work being done by the banks. So I think there's, as I say, but what's below the waterline at the moment is quite an exciting set of things which will happen. It's difficult to put a number on it at this stage, but would we expect it sitting here today to be a better year than we've seen this year? Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for your time, Tom Attenborough from the London Stock Exchange. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your time. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Alan, who is down talking to Darren Hazelwood of Panther Metals Resources just before he goes and does his mining spotlight. So, Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm joined at the Resourcing Tomorrow Theatre by Darren Hazelwood and Nick O'Reilly, Chief Executive and Chairman, respectively, of Panther Metals. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Alan.
Hi, Alan.
So Darren, how's the show been for you so far? We've seen plenty of people visiting the booth.
Yeah, it's actually been a really relaxed environment, and it's always a nice event because of the depths of knowledge that people have got, and you're able to go through the projects, our understanding, our theories, and you can really do a deep dive. and people get it. And had the same experience last year, and it's certainly been replicated this year and probably multiplied. And I think the number of people we've had at the booth, not just inside but also around the booth, speaks volumes for how the business has grown and how our networks have grown and what's going on. And we managed to touch base with the political powers at Canada as well that are here. It's great to see them supporting the industry, supporting the Canadian companies. There's a lot of big names here. Fantastic.
That's good to see. And Nick, I know you're a chairman of vast experience. How have you found this event, certainly for Panther?
Well, as Darren says, it's been great, well attended. There's from a technical point of view. So my background is I'm a geologist, been working in the mining industry since the late 90s. I've obviously got a big network. There's a lot of people who are just passing by. They know I'm involved with Panther. They know Panther is, if I'm involved with it, then it must be worth hearing about. And so there's been a lot of interest. I've been catching up with contacts and informing them what we're doing. And so it's been really useful.
Excellent. Well, of course, exciting news for the company and for investors in regard to the drill results at Dotted Lake. Can you just bring us up to speed on those again, Darren?
Well, look, Nick's the man. He was out in Dotted Lake for a month. He's seen the core physically, whereas I've only seen it through images. But we're very pleased with the visuals that we've got on that core. And I think the right man to ask would be the gentleman to my left, who is a geologist also.
Yeah, so as Darren says, it's interesting core. It's exactly what I was expecting. We're now going through the process of logging it, getting the core cut, sampled. First batch is in with ALS for assay now, and we'll just be waiting for those results to come back.
Okay, so just as we come up to Christmas and of course into early 2025, can you give perhaps viewers a flavour of what they can expect in the coming months from Panther?
Well, I think it's going to be the coming weeks. So I would encourage all of our followers to review the whole from 2021, which was largely ignored by the market. It hasn't been ignored by the industry. We've got some encouraging looking core along strike from that. That could be very significant for the business. We don't know until we get the essays back. We're expecting that to happen before Christmas if people can stay within the timelines they've given us. That's not always possible. Things happen. And then you're going to be rolling out results in January, probably into early February now, I'd expect, Nick, wouldn't you? But also we are working behind the scenes on the next stages at Abonga. We're also working at Dotted Lake on how we take that forward. I can probably comfortably reveal that the drill rig has been left on site at Dotted Lake. If I don't think you can probably have a more encouraging setup than that. We're having the right conversations, and we're a company going places, and it's going to be 2025 was always going to be exceptionally busy for us. And I always believe in a deleveraged structure within the business. What does that mean for an explorer like Panther? It means that we will look at Dotted Lake, we'll treat it as a project on its own, and we will act accordingly as that project on its own. And then we'll move on to Abonga whilst Dotted Lake is still operating. You know, the market's been patient with us. It's now time for us to accelerate this business model, grow the business, and get the returns for shareholders that are looking for.
That's good to hear. But of course, we've seen you in conversation with various people in the industry, some fairly senior figures during your tenure here. Is there anything you can tell us about those meetings?
No comment.
Okay. Well, I think you've heard it here first. So just remains for me to say, Nick O'Reilly and Darren Hazelwood from Panther Metals, thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Alan.
There we go. So I'm just going to clip that sound. Okay. So apologies if no one heard that. It's Jeff Townsend from the Critical Minerals Association joining me now. So yeah, thank you for your time. How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for talking to you.
You had a busy day.
It's been really busy. Been up here since 8:30 we start, something like that,
Okay.
and then it's been non-stop. I don't know how many people we've had around, but it seems busier than last year. So
Yeah, I've heard
heading
that.
in the right direction.
Yeah, I heard that. So just before we talk about that generally, just give us an introduction to the CMA. You know, why you started it, I guess, and what you do.
So the Critical Minerals Association was started in 2020 in the UK. My background is I was born on a mine, grew up in mines, realised I wasn't that smart, so I went into politics and did that for 20 years. And I got very frustrated with politicians and Western governments talking about downstream production, moving into this green future economy, and yet not talking about the supply chain.
Okay.
Felt we needed to give the industry a voice. A lot of small players not listened to, but collective voice, then we're heard. Right.
Okay,
So we started that 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now. Represent 50 companies in the UK. We have CMA Australia and CMA USA as well, and an international body as well. And that's collectively just under 100 companies globally. Anything in the critical mineral space.
So these are companies in the quality space, presumably, and you're also working with bodies, government bodies as well, or?
Yeah, so we kind of provide that bridge between the critical mineral space, whether it's companies or consultants, law, finance, to the political world.
Okay.
So my background, obviously, lots of years in the corridors of power and around the world talking to politicians. I speak their language. So I like to think of it as the industry's big brains and my big mouth. So what we do is we take the industry's great ideas and we distill that into language that decision makers, be it politicians, media, society, can understand and can hopefully support the industry with.
So you must have quite a good sense then of what it's the feeling on the ground, if you like, amongst governments globally about how they're feeling about the current situation in terms of securing their supply chains. We hear it quite a lot, that there's quite a lot of fear from Western governments about securing their supply chains. You know, this kind of East-West divide, let's say, seems to be just getting a bit worse. Give us a sense of what it's like from a government level.
And that divide, sadly, will probably continue to get worse for the foreseeable future. I think 4 years ago, pre-COVID, governments didn't really care about this. We had a globalized world. 35 years of globalization provides stability, provide the opportunity to do the best things in the best places of the world. We can get rid of some of our dirty industry to places that we don't see. People are now struggling with the enormity of the challenge that faces them. To go from zero in this to actually having to secure the entirety of the supply chain, vertically integrate, and making sure you can build electric vehicles here or whatever. So what does that leave governments do? They're facing a huge challenge that needs ridiculous amounts of cash to actually deliver, and in a time frame that is almost impossible to deliver given net zero and climate change. A huge challenge, but I would say, whilst government isn't moving fast enough or further enough for industry, in political terms they are moving relatively fast and relatively far compared to usual business. So
would you say they're sort of behind the curve but not really far behind the curve? Or
I would say that 4 years ago the governments weren't taking any steps forwards. We're now taking 2-3 a year.
Right.
Sadly, in some places the challenge is taking 5-6. But everyone's moving forwards, and that's got to be a good thing.
And from sort of the Western point of view, what commodities do you think are the most in demand? Because I know, for example, we talk to a lot of rare earth companies, and China's practically got the whole of that market, and that's a problem. Particularly with the green economy shift, we need these rare earths. So what are some of the commodities that the West are more kind of concerned about over others, would you say?
Okay, so I think critical minerals, given their strategic importance, so anything from lithium through to graphite through to beryllium and borates are on that list, and the UK released its critical minerals strategy last Wednesday, so that brought in a whole suite of new things. What I would say we're starting to see is governments moving from an ESG compliance kind of agenda. We need these for net zero, for renewable energy, I would say there is more of a strategic or defense weighting coming in,
Right.
specifically led by the US, but that is starting to creep into others as well,
Okay.
given what's going on around the world at the moment and given some tensions that may be coming down the track
Okay.
in a few years' time.
Well, we'll
So there is a transition from critical minerals in the renewable energy sector to the
More
defense sector.
defence, okay, yeah, and that's obviously, yeah, they probably take that more seriously than the environmental.
They do. And they suddenly find money.
Yeah, exactly. From a government level, are you seeing, from your point of view, government sort of really taking direct involvement in mining companies, or is it more on the regulatory side? So when I say direct involvement, I mean, would you say governments are interested in taking direct stakes in companies to back them or give them grants, or is it more on the regulation in terms of making things a bit easier, dropping hurdles, that kind of thing?
So I think initially government started by looking what they could do in the regulatory space. So whether it's increasing the, making it easier to get permits and planning, whether it's about freeing up zones to make it easier and cheaper to do things. As these companies are progressing from exploration through to now in an operational stage, we're hitting that valley of death. And I think at that stage, we're now starting to see governments injecting directly into companies. So in the UK, we can talk about Cornish Lithium. Just got $60 million from the UK government, supported by TechNet and another US. But that was a direct engagement from the UK government through what is now the National Wealth Fund to fund that project because it was seen as strategically important to the UK government.
Okay.
So there is a value for that. The US is doing it as part of a major suite of things. And we are seeing it across the EU at a state level more than at a federal level.
Okay.
That direct
Right.
engagement.
Okay.
So
Okay.
horses for courses, but it is getting there.
Yeah, indeed. It's nice to see the Cornish Pavilion here, of course, and Terry, Minister of Mines, are here as well.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see those kind of big presences here. When it comes to, let's say, car manufacturers, who need to secure their own supply of critical minerals for their vehicles they're going to make, how much interest are we seeing from car manufacturers sort of partnering directly with mining companies?
So I think 2 years ago or so, we saw a lot of car manufacturers partnering directly with critical mineral companies. I think that seems to have dropped off a bit as people start to understand the massive complexity of the supply chain. I spoke to one car manufacturing, and for one part of their car, they had 3,000 touch points in their supply chain.
Right.
So then it becomes very hard to be engaged in all of those. So I think there's now a look by these OEMs at, yes, we desperately need these. Yes, we want to partner with the best companies. Yes, we want ESG credentials. Where we engage within that supply chain, that is now being discussed in a bit more minutiae and a bit more detail. I don't think we're yet seeing the fallout of those discussions.
Okay. And just a final thought, Jeff, if we can. Again, from your point of view, with all the interactions you have with people, where would you feel the industry sort of is at the moment, and what's your sense of where it's going to go? I know from this year, talking to lots of juniors, it's been quite a tough year. Valuations are quite low. It's hard to raise capital. We have got commodities doing very well. Uranium was the talk of the town last year at this conference, remained at that level. Copper's been talked about a lot, nickel, gold, of course, breaking all-time highs. There's maybe a sense that the bottom is maybe coming in and we might start to crawl away out of this. But what's your kind of sense of perhaps where we are now, and what's the outlook for the sector for the next few years?
I think demand is only going to grow until 2050. So we are going to need to bring to market more than we ever have before in the critical mineral space.
Sure.
There are inherent risks in the critical mineral sector, and I think that's a lot of the problems we face.
Yeah.
I would say that 2024 has been hard. I think the first Q1, Q2 of 2025 may also be hard, but I do start to see that getting through and getting easier as we progress.
Okay.
And I think that's got a lot to do with the discussions governments are having, finally taking decisions and maybe de-risking a few of these projects. So fingers crossed we can get our companies through the next couple of months, right? And then I think we'll be in a nice position.
Yeah. And once that tide has really turned, then it's, it's kind of, you don't need to worry almost, don't you? You've probably got 5-10 plus years of the sector doing quite well.
Well, it's that, yes, I hope so.
Yeah.
I absolutely hope so, and I believe that demand is there to make this happen. I think that we have to do things differently, and if we can do things differently, if we can finance differently, then I think it's only an upward trajectory.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolute
Jeff
pleasure. Thank you
Townsend,
for having me.
Founder of the Critical Minerals Association. It's great to have met you in person. Enjoy the rest of your time here. We are going to take a little bit of a 5-minute break now. Then we're going to finish off by talking to Dannika Warburton. She's come all the way from Australia, not to talk to us, but to conduct business. But she'll give us a sense of what's going on in Australia. But for now, thank you very much for your time. Well, welcome back here onto Stockbox for our final segment of the live stream today. I hope you've all enjoyed it. We've broadcasted all the way through since 9:30 this morning. Some stops and starts, people perhaps not finding exactly where we are, but I think we've had a pretty good day of content. Our final guest is Dannika Warburton, Director of Investability.
Yes,
and we're going to go for a little
here
walk,
with you, Mark.
aren't we?
Yeah, let's
So
go check out the conference.
we're going to have a walk and stretch our legs. I've been stood still for most of the day here. We'll walk on the balcony and just have a chat. And I know you've got a panel.
I've got a panel coming
pitch
up.
battle,
It's
isn't it?
well, actually, we're doing two things, but today's event that's in a few minutes. So is the battle pitch for the Heat 2 of the critical minerals.
Yeah, okay.
Best projects in and what's most investable in critical minerals, which is really interesting.
So you're on Heat 2, so that's good.
Yeah.
So I did a Heat 1 last
Did you?
year.
Yeah.
So you'll actually get more of a perhaps the better companies
Well,
pitching
we'll
me.
see.
I don't know. But anyway, you've had a bit of a trip, haven't you? I mean, you've been in Amsterdam, where I live, and I
Yes.
think you went to Lisbon. So just tell us a little bit what you've been doing this last week or two.
Well, it's great to come over, to Europe and see all of the contacts because, I think our industry is so lovely because it's so collaborative.
Yeah.
So to be able to come over and, do, meet you in person and do these sort of things. And the Amsterdam trip was based on an interview, someone that I'd been speaking to for 3 years, working with and had never met.
Okay.
It was really interesting. We just talked about investing and natural resources and that sort of.
And the companies that you work with, I think you do similar things to what we do. You sort of do CEO interviews and events and things, particularly in the mining space or across all of the...
Well, we do full service IR, so a little bit different. But
Okay.
I think the reason why we do focus a little bit on content is because a lot of the smaller cap companies, they're targeting retail investors.
Yeah.
So the best way to reach those sort of investors is via digital means and digital channels, and you've got to have really compelling content to be able to sort of cut through the very crowded space that we're in. In terms of your second part of the question, we do focus, we seem to be in a bit of a niche with natural resources. However, we do other market
others
sectors
as well. Okay,
yeah, tech and some funds management and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
which keeps it interesting.
Yeah. Well, I had a good chat with John Forwood. I know you know.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you know.
We're going to dinner tonight, actually.
Yeah. Oh, he told me you're going to dinner. I know he was at an event the other day with you, wasn't he? I think. Or
Yeah. He
ago,
was
maybe.
actually one of our panelists on an event that we had back in Sydney.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, he's a lovely fellow.
No, really nice. And
yeah.
he had lots of time for me. And I asked him about the sort of commodities
Yeah.
that the fund is involved with. And he said, they're a pretty agnostic split across the whole spectrum. But
Yeah.
about 50% really of the exposure was in the precious metals. So gold and silver. Of course, gold doing extremely well in these last years, breaking all-time highs. But a couple of other commodities that sort of surprised me a bit. You mentioned nickel. You mentioned bauxite.
We spoke about this last night,
Yeah.
not John and I, but seems to be a bit of a flavour of the moment.
Bauxite?
Yeah, I
Well,
know. I was surprised too.
You have to forgive my ignorance on bauxite. I mean, do you know much about it? Because I'm not really
I
sure.
think it's an input into aluminum. I'm not sure. Don't ask me. I'll get it wrong. Obviously, not a geologist, and my mining engineer father will be horrified.
But if bauxite's becoming more of a hot commodity, we're going to have to brush up on it because not everyone's talking about it. But copper as well was a big theme.
Yeah.
And of course, uranium, which at this show last year was the talk of the town because it broke its sort of all-time highs, sort of around 80, and it's basically stayed where it was throughout the course of the year. And that's still kind of hot commodity. I mean, what are you getting a sense of on the ground in Australia? I think, first of all, from appetite for investing generally in the capital markets, but then of course we're at resourcing tomorrow, so with a particular focus on the mining space.
I think uranium's definitely still in focus. Lithium's in the bin, unfortunately. Gold, as you say, I think there's a bit of a disconnect between the price of gold and then like the underlying equities though, which is starting to balance out. We're seeing lots of M&A activity within the gold space. Copper, I think feels like everyone's bullish on copper, but maybe, I don't know. I think in Australia on the ASX, there's a bit of a two-speed, not economy, but two-speed market where like the larger cap companies are doing really, really well. But it's been hard for the smaller cap companies for quite a while now. But having said that, I know that we're in London at the moment, and I do think that ASX has outperformed probably, the same companies on the London exchanges.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's
yeah.
been a tough year in 2024, particularly for the junior miners there.
Yeah.
John did make the point that perhaps the Australian investors get mining a bit more.
I think so.
Perhaps because your economies, a lot of the jurisdictions are based on or built on mining, whereas London we're very much removed from that. We can't see it. I mean, it's great to see the Cornish here. I don't know if you know much about Cornwall. It's a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah.
My father's from Cornwall.
Okay.
They have a pavilion here. They've got about 6 different companies here.
Really? I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah, so the Cornish Pavilion, and they've got the tin, lithium.
Well, Cornish tins are part of the next Battlefish, actually.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, there we are.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, good. You can.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing the story.
Hearing the story about Cornish tin. Yeah, exactly. But it's nice to see like some real good homegrown, if you like, in the UK mining companies, because we just don't get exposure to it over here. Whereas I think you guys perhaps get it a bit more, would you say?
I think so. And I think what we've been seeing is actually companies that perhaps are listed on AIM or LSE making the decision to do a dual listing or just move over to ASX.
Yeah.
That's, there's been Greatland Gold, for instance.
Well, that's a great story.
Yeah, they're
in
one
London
of
as well.
our clients. And,
yeah.
And then another company that I probably shouldn't mention because I don't think they've told it.
Okay.
It's not public, but I think that's you're correct in what you're saying, that the Australian investors seem to get
it a bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, being from WA myself, it's West Australia is like predominantly a natural resources economy.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. You're from WA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Sydney based now, so I think.
Okay.
But when you come over to London, it was interesting. Last night we went out for some drinks with actually my first ever client who's London based, and he said it's just when you go to say Australia, there's a huge, like, everyone gets it, but over here when you say, oh, I work in mining, they go, oh, really?
Yeah. So, trying to explain what you do as a job. Yeah. Oh, okay. You interview companies in the mining space. Okay. Interesting.
Oh, why though? Yeah.
But the thing is, it's exciting though, isn't it? It's quite an exciting sector. But it is a long-term mindset you've got to have with mining. But Greatland Gold, it's a great story because, of course, they managed to raise a significant amount of money from London. There's money available for the compelling project. Yeah. And I think
it's such a fantastic story, and I think the leadership team there has done incredibly well to
exactly.
to get
Sean Day, we spoke to him a couple of times before, so it's nice to see that company going well. It's a shining star in the murk of what is the doldrums at the minute of the junior mining space. So we're going to head back into your, because I know you've got your pitch battle starting.
Yes.
But what did you here for a few days?
I am. Yep. I'm here all week. So I'm hosting the Australian Mining Equities Outlook for 2025 panel on Thursday.
Okay.
So that's happening at 1:30.
That's here. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That'll be interesting. Yeah, we've got a couple of very.
I think John's on that, isn't?
John's on that.
Yeah.
John Ford's on that. And then
you ready for that? What are you going to talk about? Are you just hosting?
Well, that's my bread and butter, right? So I can speak about that ad nauseum. But I think that'll be really insightful, and it's great to be, flying the Aussie flag.
Of course.
London.
No, it's nice, and there's a lot of Aussie companies here, a lot of North American companies here as well. It's a handful of mining, of London mining companies. But I get the sense that talking to different people today, I've spoken to people from the TSX.
Yeah.
People
I think
from.
they've got a big event tonight, don't they?
Yeah, they usually have quite a big one, actually. I spoke to people from the London Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
And actually, the guy from London Stock Exchange actually gave me a different perspective. He said, actually, it's not as bad as, it might seem. He said, we've actually seen the biggest capital raises in Europe has been through London.
Oh, right.
So, you've got the North Americans maybe beating it a little bit. We're just going to go down some stairs, so
be careful. Yeah.
It should all be fine. But no, it was great to have a chat to him, and I'm getting the sense that you can never call the bottom, can you? It's very difficult in this space to sort of call the bottom in commodities. But I'm getting the sense, and the fact that there's a lot of people here, that there is interest there for the good projects. There is money there for the right project.
Definitely.
I think we perhaps are in a point where we're going to start seeing the tide really starting to turn, and when it does start to turn, then we're going to really, have a good few years at it, aren't we?
I think so.
in the sector.
Yes, it's all very cyclical, but I think there's always
Very
going to be appetite for good quality companies that are run by good management teams and and that communicate well as well, so they keep their shareholders up to date. Those are the sort of companies that really stand out at these sort of conferences. So it is interesting to sit in and listen to the mining spotlights, and you can generally get a bit of a gauge.
Exactly.
And
what's it like in Australia, just to finish off then, when it comes to the perhaps how the miners are talking over there, or the interest that the engagement you're getting from the markets generally? Do you feel it's got a good future? Do you feel?
I think so. I think it's very very, very positive. We get a lot of investor interaction on the companies in our stable. I think there is a huge retail investor base in Australia, and that's maybe by virtue of our sort of superannuation system. But there's companies that I guess communicate well, is what I was saying before. They're always going to have the most appetite because people know about them. And I think that's why companies come to these sort of things, is to sort of get their message out there. And
I mean, a good bellwether is how busy are you? Are you busy?
Pretty busy.
Yeah.
I think it took me a few days to reply to your
That's
message.
very
So
true. Yeah.
So
we're quite busy at Stockbox. Although it's difficult to raise money, we are quite busy. So that says that there is obviously interest in the space, that people do want to get out there and start telling their stories.
Perhaps we need to just educate like the younger demographic, because I find that most of the investors that engage with our content are 46 to sort of
same
70.
kind of thing.
Predominantly male. There is an opportunity.
I was talking
there.
to Marley Palin from BHP Explore this morning.
Yeah.
She was really cool. She's come from the tech environment. And she's bringing that kind of Silicon Valley venture capital idea to BHP with Explore.
Awesome.
So it's saying that injecting capital, access to the knowledge that comes from BHP to really kickstart some junior mining projects. And she said, we've got to make mining sexy again.
Yes.
And that's kind of attitude that I like. It's like it could become as sexy as the sort of the investment going into crypto, for example, or the tech space, because it is cool. It's treasure hunting.
Well,
and we
everything
need
that
it.
is kind of cool, at the moment, I think like AI data centers and, anything tech, or your phones, or, anything like that, like all relies on natural resources, doesn't it? So it just is maybe, there might be a rebrand that needs to happen.
Yeah, well, let's hope.
Get some younger people interested and knowledgeable. So I think it's first about educating people, and then once they're educated, then some fantastic investment opportunities in the space.
Yeah, and you can get phenomenal returns. You look at
absolutely
Greatland Gold. I invested in Greatland Gold in 2016 and sold that about a year later, having doubled my money. But, if I'd have held on to it, I'd
Shout
have
out
been
to
a
Greatland
lot
Gold.
more wealthier. Anyway, we're here at the Panther Money Theatre. You're going to do your pitch battles.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I'll let you go. And
It was lovely to chat to you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you in person. Yeah,
absolutely.
So I think we'll just sign off from Stockbox. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us throughout the course of today. Tomorrow we'll be doing a little bit of live stuff, but not a full day of live. We're a bit more dynamic on the day. But stay tuned on Stockbox for everything from Resourcing tomorrow. But for now, we're signing off. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter, and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.